So a brief audio warning before we get started. I have a tendency of breathing rather deeply and heavily as I talk, as I'm sure you can tell even through this little bit here. This will get better as I continue doing this video stuff. This is my first time, so fair warning. My name is Kane, and what you are about to listen to is the first part of a Dungeons & Dragons game that I ran for almost an entire year. I am mostly a DM in my home group, as I have been playing Dungeons & Dragons for about 5 years. Out of everybody that I know, I have been playing the longest. This first story that I'm going to tell you will have little to no visuals, so if you would like, you may use this as some kind of audio distraction in the background as you work on other things around your house, or while you're driving, or something of that ilk. Our story begins on a continent known as Junrex. There was a guild there. A guild called Night Raid. There, a Grand Master, who hardly anyone recognized the name of, had ordered his newest recruits to travel on to a neighboring continent. The party was made up of a human blood hunter named Marshall Clawgrasp, a goblin rogue named Galren, a human fighter named Jack, and a tabaxi druid named Tabby. Marshall was called the leader of the group, as he had the most experience, being with the guild for 2 years. The mission was rather simple: to deal with something called the Deck of 52, created by a man known as Vaden. Vaden simply asked for soldiers, or people to handle these monsters. And Vaden had the contract set up very reminiscent to a standard 52-card composition. When the party arrived at the neighboring continent of Grixa, they traveled to the closest town next to the port, known as Crustra. There, they encountered the mayor, who was rather excited for their arrival, as Vaden happened to be there. Vaden explained to them the idea of the Deck of 52 and began explaining their mission. To complete the deck, they would have to first complete a set, and the first set was spades. The deck began with number 2, Knolls, in the hills near Crustra, 3 kobolds, 4 flesh golems, 5 a spine devil, 6 a cockatrice, 7 a bearded devil, 8 a dark mantle that was attacking at night, 9 the shadow demon, 10 a group of bugbears that had unfortunately begun attacking near Castletown, a settlement in the middle of Grixa, jacks, gargoyles, somewhere near the swamps to the northwestern side of the continent, an Etten for the queen, which, to those that do not know, is a large, almost like an ogre type monster, for the king, a doppelganger, and for the ace, a beholder. These monsters have been ravaging the continent, and all Vaden wants from the party is for them to eliminate them. "What is our prize?" Jack begins, with Marshall, of course, giving him a shrewd sort of glare. You see, Marshall and Jack don't get along, if only because of the fact that Jack is still recovering from a unfortunate bout of seasickness. Vaden smiles, of course, with plans of grandeur, and says, "I'm willing to pay you any amounts of gold. As you can tell," and he points to each contract, "they have been labeled with a certain gold piece amount. You'll receive ample reward, I'm sure. I just need proof of their death. Now then, if you would be so kind, I have to go." And as he leaves, a man steps in. He doesn't say a word as he appears to escort Vaden out. As they travel to the General Merch, which is actually fairly close to the town hall, they enter, only to find what looks to be like a Jamaican man. They learn that his name is Maxie. He's rather solidly built, and he's joyous, and he just smiles. He speaks to them in a rather thick accent. His brother walks in, and in steps Faximan. He looks like a spitting image of his brother, and he's just as excitable, just as happy, and just as willing to sell product to the party as long as they're willing to pay. Obviously, the party is willing to pay, as they have just been given a new job. The party, upon hearing that the brothers have a third sibling, try to discover his location. The two brothers tell the party of their third brother, who is currently off to Castletown, who operates the magic shop here in Crestra. The party at first is delighted to hear that there is a magic shop. However, they are disheartened when they hear that their third brother, Jaxie, is not in town. In fact, they are rather disheartened because, well, anyone would be willing to spend any kind of gold to get some kind of magic. As the party begins to look over the contracts after their visit in the General Merc, they decide to, tackle the first thing that's on their list, the gnolls. Fortunately for them, the gnolls attack them. Immediately outrushes 3 gnolls from around the corner of the General Merchant, and off in the distance they can see 6 more. Immediately a fight breaks out, and the party, going toe-to-toe with these gnolls, promptly kill them, because gnolls. In fact, the party is able to wipe them out fairly quickly, and is able to capture one in 2 rounds of combat. See, I didn't realize, when writing the encounter, that my party was going to be able to wipe out 9 gnolls in almost 2 rounds of initiative. Now, immediately you're probably thinking, how does that equate? Well, think about it. You have 4 players, one of which is a rogue, a fighter, a blood hunter, and a druid. Needless to say, my players were rolling rather high in our first session of the game. I won't go too strenuous into the details behind the scenes. I will only go into detail of things that don't make any sense, are rather hard to explain, especially in a D&D campaign setting, or are, well, something like this needing explained. So, with that in mind, the party kills the 9 gnolls and decide now is the time to attack. These gnolls, well, they weren't exactly a challenge, and from what they understand, the gnoll cave is pretty close to Crestra. Best to make light of a situation and clear the cave out, yes? So the party makes their way. They manage to find the cave after about a day's travel. They take a long rest, breaking off into shifts. A first shift, dead man shift, and a third shift. So basically, nightfall, dead man's, sunrise. After getting a rest and finding the cave, they more or less straight up attack it. There are 2 guards standing outside the front gate, and with the fighter and the blood hunter, they knock the guards out and promptly slay them, with little to no hesitation. At first I was kind of worried, but then as the party traveled into the cave system, which is not really much of a dungeon. This was my second campaign I had ever ran, and my dungeon design at the time wasn't the best. This cave was essentially a cave that you would enter in, and you would have one path, and it was off to the left, and it basically circled around all the way until you hit a big central room. And off to the right, you could find another path that would lead you literally to the same place. It was essentially just a shortcut, and there were little rooms sprinkled along the sides. Again, not the best. For a first session, it's not bad, especially considering you're trying to get a gauge of what your players can and can't do, how good they are in a fight, and more accurately, how well they know their character to this point. Especially considering their first level. So, they fight their way through the cave, and they make their way into a big central room. There, they find a gnoll and, well, 2 gnolls and a gnoll chieftain, who actually has a player level. However, his player level is not that of a strong character. It is essentially a gnoll with gnoll stats that just so happens to have a single rank in Druid spellcasting. I'm pretty sure there's a monster for it in the monster manual, but I could not, for the life of me, find it. And chances are it's right next to the gnolls, and I'm just missing it. But that's neither here nor there. The fight begins. The rogue, obviously going first, attacks the 2 gnolls. More accurately, attacks one of the gnoll guards, and she doesn't kill it outright, but she drops its health into single digits, which, for a first level character, not too impressive. Next is the Blood Hunter, Marshall. Marshall attacks the Gnoll Chieftain head-on and begins a one-on-one fight with him. Jack pulls out his rapier who was next in initiative, and begins fighting the second guard that Galren was not fighting. Tabby, deciding to be more of a healing support character, kind of stood off to the side at the end of initiative. So how initiative would go would be Galren, Marshall, Jack, the Knowles, all three of them, I rolled pretty crap, and Tabby. This combat initiative lasted 3 rounds. On the second round, Galren dropped her guard. On the third round, Jack dropped his. Out of all 3 characters, Jack was the only one that was not rolling the best, and that was only because he kept rolling under 10. After defeating the Knoll chieftain, they find a round ring that's on his muzzle. After killing the Knoll chieftain, the party finds a ring surrounding its muzzle, to the point where it's at the base. After pulling the ring from its mouth, it shrinks to the size of a normal ring. Without hesitation, Jack slaps that ring right onto his finger, and it immediately burns his skin. This is a cursed item. I called it the Cursed Firebrand Ring. What it did was, every time you would take combat physical damage, you would take that damage halved, but it would be fire damage. If the damage was above your constitution would immediately get a penalty and go down by 1. Permanently. So that would mean Jack had a constitution of 16. Jack had a constitution of 16. That would mean if he took 16 or more points of damage, his constitution would go down by 1 to a 15. And it would progressively get worse. However, all the damage he took was half fire damage. Meaning, all the damage he took was halved and turned into fire damage. Which means, at the beginning, the ring's not that bad. You're taking hits, you're losing, it's like a barbarian's rage, but if it breaks over your constitution, eventually your constitution's going to burn you out, and you're dead. This artifact, again, is a cursed item, and none of the party had identified, and Jack just slapped it on. To give a little backstory here, Jack's character is played by one of my personal favorite people in the world. He is being played by my brother from another mother, my cousin. I will not give his name, but he used to go by Phoenix. Evil Phoenix. He's nowhere near on social media or anything like that. Evil Phoenix is my cousin. And when he builds a character around an idea. This character, he literally said, I want to play a fighter gunslinger. Matt Mercer's creation. But he has no idea what his past is. He has scars from a monster that he can't remember. He grew up with... He has scars from a monster he can't remember facing. He has memories of living with a mother and father who aren't his real parents. His memories are scattered. What my cousin told me, and what every DM wants to hear, is here's my idea, make his backstory for me. Every DM hates to hear it, but loves to hear it at the same time. Because if the player knows you well enough to know that you're not going to make his backstory something really screwy, they'll give you full creative freedom. What I just told you, was all he gave me, and said, you have complete creative freedom to do with it as you wish. And he and I will actually do this a lot, where he'll give me a character concept, he'll give me the build, the stat, he has everything else made. And the backstory is always, here's the concept, here's how it starts, you can fill in the blanks. So, this does come with some problems. Primarily, the problem of, this is session 1, so he doesn't know exactly how to play Jack yet. Up to this point, he's been playing him very selfishly, very headstrong, very rush forward and do things. So him just taking this ring and slapping it on session 1 is in character. But normally, in a party, you usually wait for something like this to happen. But, again, he's playing a character who basically doesn't have anything strapped down, which is where one of the worst parts of being a dungeon master comes in. Trying to figure out if it's in character or not. And for situations like this, I usually just roll a die. I roll a percentile, and I see what happens. The party lets this happen. They don't argue with it. They don't stop him. They don't know what the ring is doing or what it does. All they know is Jack just ripped this ring right off the old chieftain's muscle and threw it right on his finger. And the only one, God bless her soul, that had any kind of wanting to hold off, wanting to wait, was Tabby. This is where the session ended, was after completing this fight. The party had achieved a level up, and we had decided that this is where we would call it. For the adventure, I honestly don't know if I should go past this point or not. But this was my first ever session, or my session 1. This was the first session of what led to being one of the weirdest, off-the-wall campaigns I have ever DM'd for. As a DM, I love building stories and characters. I love human moments in RPGs. For me, you don't have to bring characters who are strong, who are the best. You don't even have to bring me a character who's min-maxed all to hell. If you bring something interesting to the table, that's all I can ask for. Thank you everybody for listening and holding out. Again, I don't know if I should make this longer. I plan to kind of go over the main story of this campaign. And this was my first session, kind of like a trial run. If you guys are okay with it, I'll keep going. But aside from that, y'all have a wonderful night, wonderful day, or wonderful morning. Take care, guys. Before I sign off, I would like to ask for anyone who managed to make it this far to give me some critiques. I know that I need to work on how I speak and articulate. I know there are some things here that I didn't edit out, and I apologize for that. So, if you can give me any kind of tips, hints, or tips, or tricks, or anything of that nature that could potentially help me, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.